Right, so I wanted to talk about the 4DRC drone. Um, I've actually watched a lot of videos on YouTube. Now, it's a fairly cheap drone, so um, so it's cheap for a reason. And I always put safety first whenever I deal with stuff. So that's the reason why I've been doing some testing, some stability testing, because um, I know there's one or two YouTube videos where the actual same drone by a oh look, I caught some freaking flies today. Yeah, so there's actually some videos where there was one guy, but that was in 2022, I think, where he was testing his return to home on his 4DRC Pro drone. Oh, I hit this freaking light. It just runs my battery down. Turn that off. How do you turn it off? Right. So I don't like being tortured by lights in my eyes. So there was a particular video, and I could hear the guy cursing at the end, because what happened was he was flying in a field, and he pressed the return to home button, and the drone goes and flies off into the distance, and he panicked and he started swearing a bit, but under his breath sort of thing. So it was that kind of video that I watched, because I always study all this stuff about safety and everything. It was that video that made me aware that there might be a problem with my drone, because my quadcopter, actually I prefer the quadcopter name really, but I've done a lot of flying in flight simulators in flight gear, and you probably see it on my YouTube channel. There's a few. I did some flying in the BO 105, and I've also flown other aircraft. Most of them I did in using ILS, like the Concorde, but you need to use ILS a lot of larger aircraft. But I have flown the Concorde manually, and it is quite tricky to fly in the simulator, because you've got inertial mass. That is, when you operate the joystick and you move it a bit, it takes 5-6 seconds for it to respond and start to turn like slowly like this, and that's because the mass of the aircraft has to catch up. So you've got all that to deal with, and you've also got yaw and all that stuff, and tail pitch and all that. So anyway, I'm diverting a bit. Now, the thing about quadcopters and small model aircraft is that the response time is instantaneous. So you get a small gust of wind that's, it could be just 5-10 miles an hour. But the model aircraft responds immediately, and it's immediate. You've got to react very quickly. So because of that, it's actually harder to fly a model aircraft than it is to fly a larger aircraft. And a lot of people said, nah, that can't be right. Well, it is, because a larger aircraft has got more mass and it has a slower response. So it takes a while for things to actually move, and you've got more time to think and more time to react and compensate. Whereas a model aircraft, a gust of wind comes along. So let me try and use an analogy or comparison. Let's see. Let's say 20 kilometers per second wind coming, hitting a large aircraft, say say a 747-200 or something, right? the aircraft is so large and so heavy, it's weighing tons. It's going to take a while to respond to that gust of wind. It might only be a very short duration wind. It might not even, the aircraft might not even notice it hardly, but it will react badly to a crosswind that's constant. So if you've got a crosswind, which is basically a sideways wind that's coming across the aircraft, you've got to steer into the wind, right? Now that is a situation that's quite tricky to fly. If you get a gust, just a short gust of wind, and where the wind's fluctuating and moving backwards and forwards, the large mass of a larger aircraft will be able to absorb that. Basically, it's like a buffer. It can absorb those small changes without too much of an impact on the flight attitude and direction if the wind is moving around. Because most winds are actually vortices. There's like a spiral, the wind goes around in circles. Have you ever been outside and you've seen the leaves circling the drain, sort of thing, where they're spinning around? That's usually because of vortices. Now, a smaller aircraft will instantaneously respond to a smaller breeze. So you might have a 20-kilometre wind with a larger aircraft, say, like a 747-200, but that same wind is equivalent to 100 kilometers per second on a small aircraft, to give you perspective, rough idea, just a general idea. Because the smaller aircraft is very light, it's easily influenced by external forces, but it's light, so it's got less gravitational effect on it, but it's more prone to, small winds and things like that. That's what I'm trying to explain. So anyway, I'm testing the quadcopter at low altitudes. Now, the reason for that is low altitude, you have less wind, right? That's a fact, because what you've got is drag. When the wind is blowing along anywhere, doesn't matter, the countryside or down the street, the most concentrated areas of wind are usually down streets where there's tall buildings, because you get a funnel effect where the wind gets concentrated and you get a stronger wind, especially down streets. You might have come around a corner once and just been blasted by the wind coming at you. That's because the wind is funneled. It's been funneled down the street. So that's another reason why it's not advisable to fly in built-up areas around buildings. But if you have a large area of grass, which I have in front of me, and it's quite high up, it's quite high up off the ground. What you need to do when you're flying a model aircraft, if you're in your garden or something, you need to keep about 2 or 3 feet above the ground. The reason for that is that you get a swirling effect with the wind. Instead of it being direct at your model aircraft, it's kind of swirling like this. So you tend to get these weird effects where the aircraft will lift up and it'll go down and it'll go up and down like this because of the vortices. So that is why I'm practicing. That's why I've been practicing outside in front of my house at about 3 feet, because you can see that effect more easily. Now, if I was to get, and I've also got phone lines, and I can't fly, the phone lines are about 25, 30 feet above me, so I keep down to just about 4 or 5 feet. I keep low down, because I know that if I get too high up, if I get to say 10 feet up or 15 feet up, then it's quite possible that vortices that I was telling you about, it could come sideways across the aircraft and lift it up into the telegraph wires, which the phone lines. So that is bad, and because then it could get hung up on the wires. So I keep low. Another trick, well, it's not a trick, it's a tip. Another tip, whatever you want to call it, is staying low. If something goes wrong, you can land more quickly. You can land immediately. If you're about 3 feet off the ground and something goes wrong, you can press the emergency stop and the aircraft will just flop to the floor. But if you're about 15, 20 feet up and something goes wrong, you're more likely to destroy the drone or the quadcopter. You're more likely to destroy it by dropping it from such a high height down to the ground and making a big mess. So you're going to destroy it and lose all your money, and it's a bad idea. So staying low is safer. It's also safer because you're not going to land on someone's head. It's also safer because it's not going to land on your head, and generally speaking, you also aren't going to be peering in people's windows at a higher altitude, which you don't want to be doing anyway when you're in a built-up area. So, because that's easily accidentally done. If you're high up and you turn in, the wind turns it, spins it around, there's stuff like that you've got to watch out for. By staying low down, away from bedrooms and that, it's relatively safe. But it's not advisable because it says in the manual, apparently, I've been reading the manual online, it does say it's not advisable to fly around built-up areas and around buildings and stuff. But I mean, if you're in your garden, if you're in your own space, your own backyard, so to speak, I mean, it's just your backyard. I mean, there's nothing sacred about that. You're basically in your own area. You've got everyone around you. You more or less know. You speak to them, say hi to them every day, and you can also ask them, you don't mind me flying my drone, and you get permission off them and stuff like that. So I was thinking about tethering mine actually as an experiment. When I mean tethering, I mean get a long piece of string about 10 feet, just to be, because you don't want it to take off and then run out of string and then tip over and get all tangled up in the string, do you? You want to give it a little bit of leeway. So, but tethering is probably even safer because that way you know you're not going to get out of control because you can limit it to say 8 feet, 10 feet. There's been a lot of talk about that actually on some of the channels. I've been watching quite a lot of videos about it, about tethering your quadcopter. It's a good safety measure to do if you're just learning and practicing. As I say, I've got quite a bit of experience flying aircraft, but the problem is with these quadcopters is they're unpredictable. They're unpredictable because of design flaws. There's strange behavioural issues to do with some of them, like the GPS might malfunction on you, and there's all sorts of things that can go wrong. You need to know it. You have to know your quadcopter, your drone, whatever. You need to know it. You need to know all its quirks. You need to know if it's faulty. You need to, if you can figure out if it's you that's doing something wrong or if the actual device is faulty, maybe you can fix the device. You can figure out what's wrong with it, and maybe you can get a better stabilizer or GPS or something else to fix whatever's wrong with it. And if it's complete garbage, then yeah, probably better idea to buy another one. And the trouble is they're expensive, but some of them have come down in price. There's some really cheap ones out there. What I would like to see is some of them really minis, the tiny ones which you'll fit in the palm of your hand, the really tiny ones. I'd like to see some of those on YouTube with GPS, because those, without a camera as well, because those are perfect for learning. And I know there's a few minis you can get, and I think they're around 20 quid, 25 quid, or some of them. I think you can get one for, at the moment. Let's see, we're in May, in the middle of May more or less, 2023, and I saw one on eBay for a guy who was mentioning it in YouTube. It's £19 without a camera. And that's even better. I might even get that myself because at some point, because it's so cheap. But the trouble is, I don't think it has GPS, and ideally GPS is a good thing to have because it gives you stability. So if you get panicky, you don't know what to do, you can let go of the controls and the GPS will keep it stable. That is what's important. The GPS is really important, especially in windy days. Obviously, you don't want to be flying when it's really windy. I mean, I'm talking about 15, maybe 20 knots. You know, you might get a gust, and it's a good thing to have GPS where it can self-correct itself. And the smaller the drone, the the faster it can get carried off with the wind. But if it's not strong enough, it could easily get carried off. So tethering them as well is a possibility. But obviously, the smaller they get, the less torque they have, and the string itself might become a bit of a weight problem. It might actually not be able to lift the string if it gets too long. You know what I mean? So you keep the string short, so you don't add too much of a weight to it. So say with a tiny little quadcopter that's in palm of your hand size, you know, you're probably looking at what, 6 feet, you know, just to play around and learn how to control it properly and all that. So otherwise the string itself might get tangled in the props, you know, and all that stuff. There's all sorts of things that can happen. So yeah, you got to weigh up all the pros and cons and balance everything. And obviously some of these regulations now, if you need to get an ID and all this stuff. I'm looking into that at the moment. I'm researching that because it's complicated. It's to be honest, the CAA stuff, it's a mess. It's a complete garbled jumble of confusion, because what they really need to do is they need to have what's called a tree plan, so that people can follow a questionnaire and go down a branch to the area which is relevant to them, you know, just them, and then I have that branching off to all the various answers to do with just them. But at the moment it's a complete mess because it's generalized. So it gives you all these general questions at the beginning, then you follow through and you're finding all these other things that it says you need to do, and all this you have to do, and you need to register that, and you need to register your child and all that. But a lot of those questions are to do with the first question about, does it have a camera, does it not have a camera, does it weigh less than 250 grams, all this. This is what I'm saying, it's a mess. They need to get that all sorted out so that people can, you know, focus on what's important to them and not get basically drowning in all this information that might not be relevant to them, because that's what I'm seeing at the moment. It's completely confusing. It really is. I mean, I'm not stupid. I mean, I'm not the brightest person in the world. I'm not stupid. But when you're reading this stuff and you're trying to figure out what you need, if you need an ID, you need a flyer ID and all this stuff, and it's just confusing because you see, they say if the drone's got a camera, you need to get an flyer ID and a drone ID and all this stuff. But if the camera's not being used, if you're not recording, then why does it matter if it's carrying a payload, which is basically a camera? If you're not even using the camera, you shouldn't need to have, if it's just a flight asset, you know, to give you a perspective that you might not otherwise have. For example, let's say you're flying the drone, right, and you're at low altitude, you're at 5 feet, you're very low down. Somebody walks right in front of you and blocks your view. You can't see the drone for a few seconds, and all of a sudden you lose control of it. That could cause an accident. So therefore the camera would be a backup. You could look down at your screen and see whether it was, and you could make corrections to stabilize it and keep it under control, because you do get idiots that will walk straight in front of you, and that happens all the time. So when they say it's got a camera, you need to get an ID. You might not even be recording. It's basically your eyes and ears. You need to be able to see what you're doing. So some of this legislation, some of these laws really don't make any sense, because that's like flying blind or driving. Imagine if you were driving a car. We're talking. They've got these cars now, driverless cars apparently, and like the Teslas, that can drive themselves. How do these cars drive themselves? They've got sensors and they've got cameras, and the actual computer system using cameras to actually follow the road. So that's like saying the Teslas need to remove the cameras off the Tesla. That would be stupid, wouldn't it? So when you get into all these rules about cameras, There's two ways. You can use a camera rightly, in the right way, or you can use it in the wrong way. I think we need to get back to basics. You know, are you breaking the law? Are you filming someone illegally? If you're not filming anyone and you're just using it as your eyes, like you would have when you're driving a car, you need to see where you're going. And when you're reversing, you have a camera up the rear bumper to make sure you don't crash into the car behind you when you're parking. There are some... Excuse me, I need a drink. So, you know what I'm saying. It's our eyes. We're being blindfolded. We are being blindfolded by legislation which shouldn't be the case. It's a tool. It's an asset. It's something that enables someone to do what they're trying to do safely. There are abusers out there who will abuse, no matter what you do. Every single person is walking around with an iPhone or a smartphone or a camera of some kind on their phone. So what do? Get everyone to register a walking ID because they've got a camera in their phone? I mean, where do you draw the line? It's bonkers. It really is. I mean, you're less likely to be able to identify somebody from a higher altitude looking down on the top of their head than you are if you're low down with a phone in your hand taking a picture or filming someone at low altitude. Because at low altitude you can see all the face features, but at higher altitude you're mostly looking down on the top of the head. So what is going on with this camera business on a drone? It doesn't make any sense. Unless somebody has got a building out there that they don't want anyone to see. So I suppose it all boils down to what areas are safe to fly in, where is it safe to have a camera. So yeah, it's a mess. It is a mess. So end of rant.